all set up here. Alright guys, here we go. Get into my spot here behind my lectern. You notice that I'll say that a lot, lectern, and I'll enforce it because everyone says podium, and podium's actually elevated, like when you go to the Olympics. So one of my pet peeves is when people call a lectern a podium, or a podium a lectern a podium. So I'll say that quite often. I'll say the lectern. Anyway, this is your big bad keto daddy saying hi if you hear me. All right, guys. I got that out of the way for everybody who wanted to hear it. You guys are very, very busy, and I can't say enough how much we appreciate you coming out on a Saturday morning to hear me talk about nutrition, which sometimes is a challenge in itself. Okay, so I really commend you guys for getting up, getting over here when you could have easily still been in your pajamas, hanging out, watching some TV. And I know how important that is. Okay, you could be doing a million other things right now, but you did choose to take time out of your busy schedule to come hear us speak. And that's huge, and I'm proud of you for two reasons. One is for that. The other is taking time to think about what you're putting in your mouth. Okay, that's a big deal. Okay, there's way too many times people, I believe, just write that off, and it is such an important. It plays such an important role to our lives. Okay, and I wanted to just share with you, I'm going to try to keep this to under an hour, and like I said a few minutes ago, I could probably easily speak for a semester on this at this point. Okay, so I'm going to let do a little interviewing before, try to find out where people were trying to go with this and the kind of information they were trying to get. So first and foremost, I am not a registered dietitian. I have to put that out there. That's my normal legalese out there, so you guys know that I'm not legally allowed to prescribe diets or anything of that. I do have a biology background from the University of Michigan, and I have read and studied and experimented with on myself for more years now that I felt it was worth sharing this information, because I have a lot of success stories with not only with myself but others in the gym that I run in Howell, Michigan. So with that out of the way, let's go over a couple of things that I hope we get out of today. I'm going to go over my experience. I'm going to tell you the difference between, I cover a paleo diet and a ketogenic diet. I'm going to talk really what those two different ideologies are. I'm going to talk about some of the bullet points as to why grains and dairy can be so detrimental to your health and why they're not in a paleo or natural human diet. We're going to talk about what nutritional ketosis is, first a standard ketosis or being a ketoacidosis, which a lot of people right away, as soon as you say ketosis, will go, oh my God, I heard that's bad for you. And we'll go over the differences between those and why you don't have to worry. We are going to cover a little bit for those who are interested in fat loss and weight loss about how actually you do get fat, or quite often how people do get fat or overweight. And we're going to talk about maybe how to lose that. At the end, I'm going to try to cover in some detail actually how to formulate your ketogenic diet, because it seems like I've been doing these presentations for years now, and at the end of the day, what most people really would like to know is, okay, that's great. How do I get started? What do I do? So we're going to make sure we spend some time and go over that as well. All right? So let's give you a little bit of history on Jamie. Jamie wasn't always that in-shape guy. Jamie thought he was that in-shape guy, but in reality, he was this 250-pound shop vac who ate everything in sight. Okay? I was a competitive, drug-free power lifter, and I thought that was good enough. That's all I needed to be healthy. So a couple of lifestyle change things happened. I was in a routine physical with my doctor, and he said to me, he says, Jamie, he said, there's a direct correlation between belly fat and heart disease. And I was like, who is he talking to? As a matter of fact, I think I knew Chris when I was my biggest. I think that's when we met. It's probably when I was my most rotund. I was like, God, what is he talking about? I don't understand. And just recently in the gym, I had told my buddies, my powerlifting buddies, I was like, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to take some time, get back in shape, and get my six-pack back. And they looked at me and they laughed. was literally met with roars and laughter. And I was like, what are they talking about? You know, what am I that far gone kind of thing? And then I'd caught this picture of myself on the right of my Dunlap hanging out over my pants here, and noticed that my neck and head were the same size. And I kind of realized that, hey, there's something going on here. That's not the guy that I see when I look straight on in the mirror. And I started to think, I'm going to make some changes. And that was right around the time my kids were born, or my daughter was born specifically. And I thought for sure at that point, I said, I need to make a change. We had our children later in life, early 30s, and doing the math in my head, I say, okay, when Angelina's 20, I'll be 55, and if she brings the punk home and I gotta whoop his butt, I gotta still be in shape, so I better start making some health style changes now. That's all tongue in cheek, unless you're watching Angelina. And then I started reading more and learning more, and stumbled across the paleo diet. And there's a picture of my kids there for reference. They're a little bit older now, but they're still just as cute. Anthony's now 12 and Angelina's 9. She's about to be 10. God, it goes fast. So take a hard look at my mortality, and I wanted to be that dad that could run around and play with their kids. I want to be that dad that can go to the water park, go to Michigan Adventure, go up the 75 steps of stairs all day long if I have to. I want to wear my kids out. I want to be that dad that carries both inner tubes in his hands and yells, come on, let's go. And so I started reading more and more and more, and I thought ultimately that losing weight was just the key. And then when I was talking with my friend one day, he said, you know, it sounds like you want to do more than just lose weight. It sounds like you're trying to be healthy. And I'm like, they're not synonymous? They're not the same thing? And he's like, no. He says, no, they're not. And he said, if you were really trying to make strides towards being healthy, you'd start be looking towards, you know, natural foods, organic foods, you know, grass-finished this, organic vegetables and stuff that actually have vitamins and nutrients in, again, not just things playing the role of food. So he turned me on to a book called Neanderthal, which was, as far as I know, probably one of the first books written in the natural human diet genre of books. I think even before Cordain's paleo diet book. And it was written by Ray Audette. And actually, you know, just so I'm going to mention a lot of things along the way here. I'm going to mention books, DVDs, different food stuff and like that. So I made another website called KetoDaddy.com that does nothing more than shoot you to links to where to get this stuff. So if you're ever wondering, hey, where did he talk about that movie? Where did he get that book? What was the name of that? If you go to KetoDaddy.com, that does nothing but shoot you to the stuff that I always talk about and mention. I don't necessarily make money off that site other than the t-shirts I sell, but if you want to go there and it's like, hey, what was that book? Hey, what was that almond butter? Hey, what was that salt? What was that electrolyte that he's talking about? If you go to KetoDaddy.com, I have almost everything I talk about on there. It's like a one-stop shop for ketogenic diets. Anyway, turned me on to this book, and I was reading it, and it made a lot of sense. So previously I'd been reading a lot of muscle and fiction magazines, which is because I came from the weightlifting world. That made sense. Bodybuilders professionally lose fat for a living. I figured if I want to learn how to lose fat, why not go to the people who do that as a profession? Bodybuilders professionally lose fat. And I was like, I've always like, you know, oh, you don't want to get that thin, you don't want to get that lean. I was like, you know what? If I do find myself in that situation, I think I figured out how to put the weight back on. You know, there's not any one of us, I believe, in this room that have a real hard time struggling with how to put the weight back on. So I figured if I woke up and I was too sinewy and too ripped, I could go get some cake and figure it out. So I read this book, Neanderthal, and I was like really intrigued. It made a lot of sense. It kind of like seemed like the starting point. So if we as a species were ultimately healthy, and through our evolution eating foods that we could only hunt and gather, didn't it make sense to start getting healthy again with foods that we evolved with as we were a hunter-gatherer, stuff that matched our fuel type? Be like, hey, what runs in your diesel truck? Diesel fuel. Oh, you mean not cornflakes? Yeah, okay, so it kind of makes sense from that respect. So I started reading more and more and more and more, and decided to give it a try. I mean, I was to the point where my blood work was horrible, my blood pressure was creeping up, and I had arthritis starting to develop. And I decided to try this diet. And all of a sudden I noticed things like my asthma went away. I had asthma since I was like 9 or 10 years old. And I was on the treadmill one morning just doing that traditional old treadmill work, and I was like, you know what, I haven't had an asthma attack in forever. I'm going to try and give myself an asthma attack. So I turned my treadmill up to like 10 miles an hour and put it on incline 9 and just stayed on it as long as I could. And I was like, I'm breathing hard, but I'm not doing that, you know, labored inhale kind of thing. My asthma was gone, and I was like, holy cow, there's something to this. And I had noticed that the arthritis that I was developing in my knuckles had gone away. I mean, I would literally knock it on something and it felt like lightning going up my arm. And to this day, I'm like, you know, no pain in any of my joints or stuff. And I come to find out, you know, through series of reading that is an immune response to, you know, inflammation and stuff going on in your body. So that went away too. Got my blood work checked. Everything came back around. I mean, I previously couldn't raise my HDL with a crane. I was doing the exercising. I was doing, you know, taking the 500 milligrams of niacin 2 times a day, and that wouldn't come up either. It wouldn't come up until I actually took a closer look at my diet. So we're going to talk about the paleo diet a little bit first, because that kind of, the beginnings I always feel a good place to start, and then we're going to talk about ketogenic diets. But I want to, at this point, tell you that there is a difference between the two. So you'll read stuff about a paleo diet. And the way I want you to think about a paleo diet is your grocery list. Foods that we ate through our evolution. Anything that you could hunt or gather, put in the paleo diet silo. Ketogenic diet, I want you to think about adjusting your carbohydrate level so that you put your body into a natural metabolic state called nutritional ketosis. What that primarily is you're shifting your body's metabolism to go from a sugar burner or a glucose burner to a fat burner or a ketone burner. Okay? These are 2 metabolic pathways that we have built into our metabolic DNA that are both completely natural. You don't hear a lot about the ketogenic one because primarily we spend most of our time in the glucose one. All right? And there's been a lot of good marketing put towards sports drinks and cereals and grains and all this other kind of stuff that you don't ever often hear of the ketogenic model. So just to get that out front right at the beginning, there's 2 different silos, 2 different ideologies that I have meshed together to what I think is a optimal diet for fat loss, reversing metabolic diseases, keeping some symptoms down from other diseases or ailments that may be going on there. We mentioned before, ketogenic diet's very popular with keeping epileptic seizures down in kids, and is actually one of the first clinical uses of. So we'll cover that a little bit too. So what is the paleo diet? A natural human diet, hunter-gatherer. It consists of meats, fruits, veggies, nuts, and seeds. Nuts and seeds may be coming off Jamie's list very soon, just for a heads up on that, because a lot of immune responses associated with them. And a lot of stuff going on at PFP labs that I've noticed that people have a hard time with that, but that's coming up. There's no processed food, there's no dairy, there's no legumes, there's no grains, and there's no tubers. All right? That's all stuff, meat, fruits, veggies, nuts, and seeds, stuff that we evolved eating as a species. Some of the benefits of being on a paleo diet: there's less inflammation. I remember I said that my arthritis went down, better blood profiles. So if you're living on a standard American diet, you may have elevated sugar levels way more often than you think. A lot of this stuff goes undetected for far too long and doesn't show up into our 30s or 40s after the time that we've hammered the heck out of our insulin response. If you compare, and then we're going to go over this near the end, kind of formulating that ketogenic diet, and you guys start getting more savvy with using tools like my Keto Check app or MyFitnessPal, stuff like that, you'll start noticing carb count differences between real food and processed foods. And it's going to kind of amaze you at how much sugar is really put into those things, and how much of your diet really may be consisting of simple carbohydrates and even complex carbohydrates, but how much little protein you're actually getting and how much fat you're actually getting. Quite often there's weight loss, depending on where you started this whole thing with. For some people there's weight gain, depending on where you're at in that spectrum. And if you're into training and working out, a lot of times there's faster recovery. And it's actually not faster recovery as much as it is you don't create as much oxidative stress when you're training on a paleo diet or even a nutritional ketogenic diet. The reason being is that due to the metabolic process, and I won't get into a ton of it, you actually do less damage as you train. So you feel like you're ready to go quicker. It's interpreted as recovering faster, but you're actually doing less damage. Okay. Trouble with grains, and by grains I mean there's wheat, rice, oats, however you want to pronounce, quinoa, quinoa. The fancier you pronounce it, the better you sound. Barley, corn, millet, rye. In their natural state, there's really not a lot of vitamins in those things. They break down to a simple sugar most of the time, like glucose, so it'll have a huge insulin response. And I actually have a little table coming up in a minute that'll show the difference between like a can of Coke and whole grain cereal. And you'll be surprised at what you see, actually even just plain sugar. It also contains a lot of anti-nutrients. I used to go into a lot of detail on these, but just to mention them real quick: lectins, phytates, alkaloids, goitrogens, gluten, which is a big one out there, which is pretty much the devil, and saponins. What a lot of these things do, and I'm just going to bundle them all into one group. Some of these things are their plant's own natural pesticides, so they'll react at an intestinal level and cause you all kinds of disruptions. Remember that thing as a kid, beans are bad for your heart, they make you. Anyway, that's a disruption in your abdominal wall. The gluten, lot of protein mimicry issues with that. Brain inflammation, Alzheimer issues. There's books written on how bad this stuff is, and I highly recommend, if you haven't read them yet and you're interested in that, any of Dr. Perlmutter's books, Grain Brain and Brain Maker. Did I get them both right, Holly? Yeah, I think so. They're on ketodaddy.com if you need a link to those. Saponins, that's kind of where the sweet potato and whole potato comes in. Saponin is like a soap, all right, and a lot of potatoes are laden with saponins, and what that actually does is, so all our cell walls in our body are made out of a lipid bilayer, and we've all done the Dawn dish soap thing in the sink where you have this layer of grease on top of the water and you put the drop of soap in there and it dissipates. Well, that's kind of what it does to intestinal permeability with the soap-like features in potatoes and sweet potatoes and stuff like that. And so that's where you get gut permeability. When you get gut permeability, you actually open up your bloodstream to other issues, other things in the grains like the alkaloids and the phytates, which once they pass that barrier, which they normally wouldn't be able to, now they're a foreign antigen in your bloodstream. And when you have that foreign antigen in your bloodstream, you have an immune response to that. The unfortunate part is some of these proteins look very much like home team, so to speak. So if you have an instance like rheumatoid arthritis, and your body builds an immune response to some of these foreign antigens that have passed this into your blood barrier that normally aren't there, and they look like proteins similar to that in your joints. So they're attacking those things at a blood level, but they're also attacking the things in your joints, and next thing you know, you have these great big huge swollen knuckles that you can't use anymore. That's kind of the mechanism in the protein mimicry. And it's in this country, it's very, very hard to find people who don't have a gut that's permeated due to grains and saponins and other things. And we're just talking about natural foods. We're not even talking about chemical-laden foods at this point. The amount of bombardment from preservatives and sweeteners and stuff like that have just laid waste to our intestinal flora, which Holly's going to talk on a little bit too. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the science and how to set up that ketogenic plan. But if you don't have your guts right in the first place, whether it be permeability or the gut bugs along the way to help you digest this stuff, you're at a real disadvantage right off the bat. So there's more to this than just our onboard biology. There's also our symbiotic relationship with our normal flora or the bacteria that's in our guts. And that's where a lot of the, I'm going to mention another movie right now, Autism and Enigma, that I just watched recently. Did you watch that yet? It's awesome, isn't it? Talks about a lot of the advantages about fixing your gut biome and the help it's done for some of these people with kids with autism and stuff like that. And there's the direct correlation between the your first brain and your second brain. Here's a little table that I like to show. I actually used to hand this out. If you need a copy of this, you guys can email me. Kind of shows the nutritional value that are involved with whole grains versus normal fruits and vegetables. And along that path, you can actually see, I don't know, maybe you can't see from back there. If you actually want a copy of this, shows that how much nutritional value you actually don't get from grains. And you can see it's actually very minute. Now, I'm not talking about fortified grains, because a lot of times what they do is you'll see fortified with vitamins and minerals on the package. What they've basically done is make that loaf of bread, strip it of everything that it had in the first place, and then add back a multivitamin. Okay, at that point you might as well just be taking the multivitamin and dodging the gluten and dodging the insulin response that you get along with those grains. So here it is a little about the gluten again. I did leave gluten in there because it is such a juggernaut out there. Grain protein that mimics those found in viruses and bacteria, triggering immune responses when indigested, rears its head as inflammation. And this big time at a brain level. Okay, not just a systemic level, but even at a brain level, there's a lot of, like I said, I won't be able to recommend David Perlmutter's books enough on how much he covers this. Even if you don't have time to read these things, Audible, when you're commuting, listen to him. Who commutes a lot in here? Chris? Download Audible. You can knock out a lot of these books driving to work. Listen to them and re-listen to them. Learn them like your favorite song. There's a lot of good information in there. Some of the medical conditions associated with this, the dermatitis, joint pain, reproductive problems, acid reflux, autoimmune disorders, celiac disease, and a lot of false negatives on this test too. So if you go for a gluten allergy test, don't assume, well, I didn't test positive for that, but except I still have these issues. There are a lot of false negative tests on gluten allergy tests. It's not a great way to test for that yet. All right, we talked a little bit about the saponins found in tubers, because I get this one quite often, especially from athletes. Well, how do I, if I'm following a standard paleo diet, how do I keep my carbohydrate up? Potatoes existed. You could have rooted them up if you wanted to. I said, okay, yeah, there were roots that existed that resembled potatoes that we don't have today. Also, the saponins would have laid waste on your guts. I said, secondly, the only way you could hydrolyze those carbohydrates so you could ingest them was if you cooked them. We weren't cooking anything. We didn't have controlled fire till about the last 10,000 years. So I'm talking about the millions of years of evolution. So yes, you could hydrolyze the carbons by cooking it, and then you could, carbohydrate to cook it and utilize them, but we weren't. We never had anything with that much of a carbohydrate spike, all right? So the argument I'll get from my athletes right back is, well, we also didn't train like that either. Touche, you're right, we did not. So there is ways to manipulate certain parts of this diet that you can, say you didn't want to go ketogenic, but you did want to stay Paleolithic and use natural foods to do so. You could do that, but I probably wouldn't use potatoes, just because of the saponins reason. And which brings me to another quick point. And I know I'm running right through this thing, but I'm trying to cover a lot of stuff in an hour. I eat that stuff and I don't feel so bad. I took it out of my diet for a week. I don't feel so bad. Okay, so a lot of this stuff doesn't rear its head till we get older. When does arthritis usually show up? 30s, 40s, 50s? Okay, it took that long of hammering your body before you started to feel it. You may not know how bad you feel. I often say take something out of your diet for 6 months before you can notice a difference or not. I don't know where this 6-week magic window came up, but that's just a blink of an eye for what you have going on metabolically. You should really change something for at least 6 months before you can actually, from a blood work standpoint and other reasons, get a true test of something. Egg allergies is another big one. At least 6 months before you get all that out. But here's another good slide of where, hey, where can I get my carbohydrates? A lot of people don't realize that that's what that is. All right. Dairy. All right. Where's my milk drinkers? I got any left in the room? Everyone's done with that. From evolutionary standpoint, I want you to think about that. How often did we have bovine milk? There you are, buck naked on the savannas of Africa. Chris, go get a glass of milk. Not going to happen, because I'll remind you two other things. One, you don't have a glass. Two, you don't have a bucket. So you got to get into that herd and get yourself milk. Probably, assuming from a primal standpoint, you'd probably trying to do it like the baby cow. The guy next to you with those horns isn't going to let that happen. So anyway, humans don't have a nutrition requirement for milk of another species, nor do any other mammals. That's another good point. So one of the biggest things that I'm going to keep touting in here is our insulin responsive sugar, because that's primarily what's hammering the heck out of us. If we took the whole, every other variable out of it, the 2,000-pound gorilla in the room would be sugar and the insulin response. So one of the things that I focus on is the trouble with dairy, and that's breaking down lactose, which breaks you down into two monosaccharides, glucose and galactose, which is basically breaking this substance down into white pop. Okay? There is a lot of issues with dairy amongst that. Growth hormone, back to the 2,000-pound animal. So you're trying to lose weight or whatever, and you're taking growth hormone from a 2,000-pound animal, something that's included in that slurry. Right? So everybody knows basically what milk is, right? It's filtered blood from mom, right? And filtered blood from mom at a point in its life when it's trying to keep the species alive and growing, and so it has to get this baby cow to grow as fast as humanly possible. And so it's filtering all the best things for growth, all its growth hormone, all its vitamins, all its nutrients, everything it can do to get baby cow grow fast enough so it can run away from its predator and survive, so it can have another baby cow. And you're introducing that into your little biological system. Say you have a tumor trying to grow somewhere in your body, and you just introduce bovine growth hormone. What do you think it could potentially do there? Something to think about. And there's if you look statistically, and I'm going to put this slide in the next time I do this, about the amount of people who actually produce lactase to break down lactose. Worldwide, it's very, very small. Here's another thing. So I keep bringing up the glycemic index, and here's a quick little illustration of how some dairies actually produce a higher insulin response even though they don't have the glucose response. So if you have someone who has systemic inflammation quite often, and they're fighting that, and a lot of times elevated insulin levels is the cause of that, even though there's not a glucose response from the dairy, you may in fact be having a high insulin response from dairy. And I actually got this off Cordain's website. He has a great article on dairy on there, and some of the problems that are coming with it. Casein protein is an auto-stimulating property. Again, if you had that perforated digestive system, you might actually have some of this breaking through that into that blood barrier, causing that autoimmune response. We talked about IGF-1, which is the epidural growth factor that's found naturally in cow's milk. And I'm not even talking about, we're just talking about regular old cow's milk, nothing that's been through the factory farm. So, quite often I get that argument, well, what about raw milk, blah, blah, blah. And I say, well, actually, you're probably getting a higher dose of some of this stuff because it's not been pasteurized and filtered out. Calcium is always a concern. People are like, well, where do I get my sources of calcium? There is a source of calcium in milk, but it's usually we need that increase in calcium, or women do, is because they've eaten grains. Some of the anti-nutrients that I mentioned in grains stops the absorption of calcium, or actually it binds to it so your body can't absorb it. That's a lot of times where you get that calcium deficiency. And of course, what do? Even Tums was running this commercial for a long time. Get your calcium, and they were showing that pop a couple of Tums for added calcium in there. It's just unbelievable. It's always follow the money, right? But it's a good source of vitamin D. Well, that's because they put vitamin D in there. And in order, they're saying that most experts are saying that you need about 2,000 international units of vitamin D to get to a normal level, which works out to be something like 28-ounce glasses of milk. Okay, so I had to do the math backwards on that. I'm trying to lose weight, but I need my vitamin D. I did 20 glasses of milk, which is basically white pop. It's going to really mess things up. Where do you naturally get vitamin D? The sun. There's actually 13 other phytonutrients that come with being out in the sun. Now, that's a fine line. Okay, so getting burned, bad. Getting some sun exposure, good. Okay, don't go out and come out white as a ghost and spend a day at the beach and become like a lobster. That is still going to be bad. That's going to break down a lot of things. Where that's actually really driven a lot of the times is because we don't want to look old too soon. So a lot of times people stay out in the sun, cover your face. You could even do it, and I always get the stink eye from this one. If you were disciplined enough to do 7 minutes 2 times a week in like a tanning bed, you'd probably be okay. The low pressure ultra B, because like I said, that chemical reaction that happens in your skin actually produces 13 other phytonutrients that you need for that whole metabolic process to happen. Okay. Well, what about what about the wintertime? Blah blah blah. Remember, as a species, we didn't evolve this far north. We didn't have 72 days of gray like we do in pure Michigan. So you got to kind of take that into consideration. What about winter? Well, we didn't have winter. We were in buck naked in the savannas of Africa every single day. I still argue to this day that the sun exposure thing is the sun got worse, because otherwise all the animals outside be dropping like flies from skin cancer, right? Well, they got fur. Well, what about their nose and eyes? Anyway, I digress a little bit. How do you know that's what we ate, Jamie? Anthropologists, such as at the Max Planck Institute in Germany, they do isotope calculations, or isotope measurements on prehistoric animals, or not prehistoric, through our evolution. So what they basically did is they'll take bone remnants from pure carnivores, and they'll take bone remnants of pure herbivores and do an isotope carbon count on those. Then they'll take the same era humans and compare that bone density of the isotope carbon structure of those animals to figure out exactly, well, if herbivores were eating grass, sticks, stuff like that, carnivores were eating other animals, where do they fall in that? Where do humans fall in those two pie charts? And it actually comes out that the measure is really leaning really heavy towards the carnivore species. So if you think about meats, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds on the buck naked on the savannas of Africa, and you got to eat and hunt, what do we have left? Vegetables are seasonal, fruits are seasonal. What were you eating most of the time? Usually other species. It's not hard to figure out. And it's not also hard to figure out that we did not eat as much as we eat today. Has anybody ever gone camping? Like camping? Woken up in the middle of the woods. And now picture you didn't bring any supplies. You're not getting breakfast first thing. As a matter of fact, you're getting fasted cardio because you got to chase something down, right? This is nothing new to our biology. Oh, you shouldn't do fasted cardio in the morning. You shouldn't be doing anything like that. You should probably do it for a day, 2 sometimes before finding something to eat. And if you're lucky, it was a squirrel. If you were good with a rock, right? So you weren't pounding down at the old country buffet. It was small most of the time. We spent most of our evolution starving. So how do we get fat? Oh, look, there's Tubby Jamie again. I mentioned that thing about, and I'm going to whip through these things so we can talk about how to formulate a ketogenic diet. I wanted to show you this slide because they always tote on natural, healthy whole grains. I've actually borrowed this slide from my friend Tom Naughton, who made the movie Fathead. If you guys haven't seen Fathead, you guys should watch it. Actually, I suggest buying Fathead because the Netflix version doesn't have the DVD extras, and it has interviews with the doctors that aren't chopped up, and you can kind of get their splay on it, which has 2 of my favorite in there, Dr. Michael Eads and Dr. Mary Dan Eads. Those guys are just unbelievably good scientists. To give you an idea, there's pure sugar, a Coke, Raisin Bran, shredded wheat, and natural healthy whole grain bread. to give you an idea what the glycemic index is. Do you guys know what the glycemic index is? It's after you ingest a certain amount of carbohydrate, how much it spikes your blood sugar levels. And that's actually a very, very dangerous thing. Your body thinks it's actually really poison. It's a toxic thing. Your body will do everything it can to lower that level back down to about 100, 90, 100, somewhere in there. And it does that by releasing a hormone called insulin. Elevated insulin levels over time will actually cause all kinds of inflammation as well. Elevated insulin levels also inhibits production of glucose by the liver, which is also known as gluconeogenesis. Which always brings me to that point. You'll get the argument when we talk about nutritional ketosis is, well, your body needs some sugar, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, your body can make sugar. There's 3 macromolecules that we have. And yes, I did speed up so we can get going. There's protein, fat, and carbohydrate. 2 of them are essential. Which 2? Fat and protein. Your body will make any sugar that it needs via gluconeogenesis. So we're going to go over, all right, so some insulin resistance. So if you have elevated insulin levels perpetually, you can get things like hypertension, type 2 diabetes, elevated triglycerides, and obviously obesity because it's your storage hormone. So we're going to talk about why the traditional diet doesn't work real quick. So if you went with the normal traditional food pyramid style diet, and you talked about metabolism, and that was primarily made up of carbohydrate. Okay, so your doctor says you need to eat less, move more, but you stay on a standard American diet, let's say, but you just lowered your calorie levels, ate your natural healthy whole grains, a little bit of meat, a little bit of dairy. You have an elevated insulin levels through most of that because your body's reacting to the carbohydrate, which it thinks it's evil. But now you're also working out, making your body strive for more fuel. But you have elevated insulin levels, keeping your body from releasing that stored energy, which is the fat cells on the top. So what happens over time? You build an internal hunger, and you start to get frustrated and hungry. So you want to eat more because your body's saying, we need more food, we need more food. But you keep giving it the rice cake and half a chicken breast. So you're probably not getting enough protein for gluconeogenesis, and you're elevating your insulin level, so it doesn't know to do gluconeogenesis because your insulin's high. And it won't release it from your fat cells. So you're wondering why you're not getting any thinner. And you get ticked, you get upset, and you stick with it a little longer, and your body says, we're starving, we have to slow your metabolism down now. And then you finally give up and you go hog wild at the pizza buffet. Your metabolism is down-regulated, your insulin level's up, so there's no way, even if you did work out, you're going to release that stored fat. But now you've just spiked your sugar levels again, and we have plenty of insulin to tuck that stuff away back into the fat cells. That's why it's not all about calories in, calories out. That's why it's not all about eat less, move more, to a point. That's why that doesn't work. What is nutritional ketosis? 15 minutes left, I think I can do it. Nutritional ketosis is a state in which there's a metabolic shift from utilizing sugar, glucose as cell's primary fuel source, utilizing fat, ketones, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and acetoacetate, which actually should be acetone, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and acetoacetate. Is usually established, nutritional ketosis, by restricting carbohydrate levels for most people to under 50 grams of carbohydrate a day, while keeping protein levels moderate and increasing fat to around 60% of your diet. So how many people in here have downloaded that great app, Keto Check? Yay! Teresa. All right, so we're gonna skip by some of this. We're gonna skip by some of the recovery, and we're gonna talk about. All right, we talked about that. Let's just talk about that real quick because someone's gonna go, "Oh my God, that's so bad for you." Ketosis versus ketoacidosis. Ketoacidosis is usually something that happens in type 1 diabetics because they don't produce any insulin to regulate it, and actually, it's a super elevated ketone level in your bloodstream, as well as having a super elevated glucose level. So you can have an elevated ketone level, and usually the healthy range is 0.5 millimolar to 5. And for those of you who I'm speaking sciencese, if you get a ketone blood meter, you'll know what I'm talking about. That's how they measure it, is in millimolars. A ketoacidosis would be something to the range of 25 to 50 millimolar of ketones in your bloodstream, as well as having a glucose level of around 150 on up. That's called what ketoacidosis is. Ketosis is maybe still around 100, maybe even 70 to 100 on a glucose level, milligrams per deciliter, and then beta-hydroxybutyrate levels of 0.5 to 5. That's the difference. It's like comparing a tsunami to a light mist. Let's just get down to... There's a lipid hypothesis out there too that you guys will have to battle. We're not going to talk about that today because I want to get to the formulating your ketogenic diet. So, there's 3 macromolecules out there, everybody. There's fat, protein, and carbohydrate. When you're setting up your ketogenic diet, you're going to keep your carbohydrate level low. So this is the guys where you guys want to take notes on how to formulate. This is the point to do it. You're going to keep your carbohydrate level low, usually under 50 grams. And under 50 grams, let's see, did I have a slide on that? Not this one, I'm sorry, I don't. Oh, here we go. Under 50 grams a day. Now that's going to vary for some people depending on age, activity level, etc. Proteins in the moderate level, which is usually around 25 to 30% of your diet, and then the rest is made up in fat. So, you have fat, protein, carbohydrate, which is usually measured in grams. That's actually on my app. You don't have to copy that part down if you guys are goosenecking to get that on there. So let's just talk about this so you guys understand. You have fat, protein, and carbohydrate. Those make up your the basics of your food. And if you turn over a nutrition label on anything that has a package, our government mandates that you have to have those on there. Carbohydrate is as an energy source. Fat is an energy source. Protein is a building block. So we're restricting your carbohydrate level to a point where it shifts your body over into nutritional ketosis, which means you go from a sugar burner to a fat burner. Okay? And protein is the one in the middle, which is the building block. These are made up of substrates too. If you look on some of the packaging on the carbohydrate, it'll have total carbohydrate, then it'll have fiber, then it'll have sugar, and then it'll have sugar alcohol. Most of the time on natural foods, especially green vegetables, you can subtract the fiber. Packaged items, you have to be a little fiber savvy. Soluble corn fiber, which is a lot of the products that the guys at Quest use, is something that doesn't digest. Some fibers do digest. And I'm getting to a point here. Some of the sugar alcohols that they'll put on there, and this is where marketing loopholes get in there, they will say are non-digestible, but in fact are actually slow digesting. So you have to be sugar alcohol savvy too if you're not going to include them in your carbohydrate count. A safe one is erythritol. Another safe one, relatively safe one as far as an insulin response, is sucralose. But make sure it actually is sucralose. Be aware of things that say stevia. There's a product out there called stevia in the raw, which actually has a bulking agent built into it called maltodextrin that actually digests as a sugar. Isn't that a nice one? Oh, I'm all good. It says stevia, blah, blah, blah. Oh my God, I'm not losing any weight. My blood sugar's high. So if you're not comfortable with fibers and you're not comfortable with your sugar alcohols, don't include them at all. Just make it whatever your total carbohydrate count is. And you'll be successful that way. Your protein, like I said, is going to be 25 to 30% of your daily caloric intake. So let's take an example of someone who's trying to do this for weight loss. So when I say 25 to 30%, I mean of your daily caloric intake. And you figure that out. You can actually, I put a calculator on my app. And just so you guys know, I built that app to help people. I did not build that app to get rich. You can tell. But it's a place to start for you guys. So if you download that app and go to the last page, you'll get has a BMR on it, or basal metabolic rate on there. That's your daily caloric intake, okay? And that's a rough number estimating based on your height, weight, and age what you need to maintain your current body weight. If you're trying to lose weight, there's a little slider on there that you can slide to a 10% deficit. Now, we've already determined that we're going to have low carbohydrate. Protein is your building block for enzymes, muscles, and other function in your body. Fat is your new energy source. We're not going to have an elevated insulin level because we have barely any carbohydrate in our body, so our inflammation is going to come down and our ability to store the sugar is going to go down because we have lower insulin levels. Fat is our new energy source. So when I say take a 5 to 10% deficit off the number you calculate, the app will do that for you automatically. Then that'll give you your fat, protein, and carbohydrate for the day. But what if I want to eat 3 meals a day? You divide it by 3. But what if I only eat 2 meals a day? You divide it by 2. This is a place to start. This is not etched in stone. Everybody is different, but we're all the same. Okay? 6 weeks is a good run at something, because your body's going to argue in the beginning. It's going to fight you in the beginning to maintain what's called homeostasis, what it thinks is normal. You're going to have to find, for those of you who come right from a standard American diet living out of the Speedway, once upon a time, I did it too, you may have really struggled with this. You have to find your way. Some of you are going to have to learn to weigh and measure food. For those of you who have never done that, get a little food scale at like Bed Bath & Beyond, get the coupon. Don't get a fancy one. Just get like the, what's the TV show, The Biggest Loser one. But it's nice to get one that'll zero out, so you can put your plate on there, zero it out. And there's a grams and ounce setting on there. Switch it to ounces. You'll be able to type it into the food log on my app. So 7 ounces of chicken. I had no clue what 7 ounces of chicken looked like. I was eating such huge portions, I had no clue what that looked like. It was pretty eye-opening to me. Okay? Then you can, you convert it to grams, usually 7 grams per ounce of meat kind of thing. But it'll all be on the app, so you don't have to do a lot of math. This is a place to start. You don't have a built-in metabolic spreadsheet in your body. It's not like you go to bed at midnight and everything resets. So don't think this is magic. This is biology. There is a lot of things that come into play when you're formulating a ketogenic diet. Again, we talked about 2 different diet ideologies. Paleo, Silo, which is your hunter-gatherer food list, which I am a big fan of, because it's all foods we ate during our evolution, and usually you can't get in trouble with meats, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. It's not what got us into trouble. It's usually all the processed food. Shifting your macros to a ketogenic model, whether that be for weight loss, seizures, reversing diabetes, or trying to a good battle against some cancers currently. Some people are very successful at this being loosey-goosey. Some people struggle and they need some extra help. Some people that are really metabolically damaged and having a hard time staying in nutritional ketosis, or they might have sneaky carbs in something. Beware of that. So if you have something that you're eating and you can't stay into ketosis, so maybe you get one of these great meters, a Ketonics, one of the Level Now meters, blood glucose meters, ketone meters, urine strips, and the stuff you're ingesting, say maybe it's your little Keurig cup things of coffee that are flavored but say no carbohydrate, and then come to find out that's what's keeping you from going to ketosis. Happens, doesn't it, Corinne? Some of these things, like if you can't figure out why you're not getting into ketosis, some of these meters actually really help. The Ketonics is awesome. This I have set up at my gym right now, so people just literally walk over and use it. Blood glucose meters are cheap, if not free, online. The urine strips, So if you're starting down this journey, and in the beginning, like the first week or two, they're helpful. But if you stay in a state of nutritional ketosis for 4 to 6 weeks or so, which you should, because that's when your body's metabolism really shifts over and your enzymes upregulate and you're really in the state of ketosis, your body will stop dumping acetone to urine. And when it stops doing that, you could be doing everything perfect, you could be in ketosis, but your strips will start going back down to trace because your body recognizes that as an energy source now. A really great tool, the Keto Check app, to help get you guys started, if those are trying to learn ketosis. I'm coming to find out that BMR, or the daily caloric intake tool on the last page that I almost didn't put on there, has been really helpful for getting people started, because they're like, I have no idea how much to eat today. I have no idea where to start. Where do I start? You know, very simple to use. Age, weight, height. Plug it in, it'll give you your daily, and you can put a little bit of a deficit in there. Now, if you're just trying to reverse metabolic disease and just trying to stay in ketosis, you don't have to do a deficit on the little slider. As a matter of fact, in 2014, I did an experiment where I tried to get leaner and bigger in a state of nutritional ketosis, just for my own experimentation. And I did it by keeping my carbohydrates still low, my protein the same, and just upped my fat by 1 can of coconut milk a day, because I was drinking like these coconut shakes at the time. You can get bigger on this diet too. So don't think calories don't matter on this diet just because you have low level insulin. Calories do still matter. As a matter of fact, don't get caught up in all the treats if you can. There's a lot of great recipes out there. Fat bomb recipes up the wazoo now, different ketogenic cakes, blah, blah, blah. Use them as a port in a storm. Try to eat real food as much as possible. But if it means getting knocked out versus having that treat, make that treat. You know, use it as a port in the storm. Holiday comes, birthday comes. There's some great recipes out of there. I have Stacy Ketogenic in the Kitchen out of my gym. She makes some great cake. Donuts even. All ketogenic, won't knock you out. Weight loss is your goal. Stay away from those things as much as possible, because we all discovered over the holidays that you can get keto fat. Don't combine the two. This was something my neighbor was falling the victim of. I'm wrapping up here soon, I promise. Starting out good in the morning. Oh yeah, I had eggs and bacon for breakfast. Oh yeah, I had my hamburger patty and vegetables for lunch. Oh, I'm tired on the way home, let's get pizza. And then repeat, and repeat. So now you're combining a high-fat diet with a high-carbohydrate diet, which got you into trouble in the first place. Okay, so I would suggest making a plan to commit. Now, if you think ketogenic diet might be too much for you too quick, I was very, very successful on just a standard paleo diet. Very successful. You can be very successful being 100% paleo 85% of the time, such as Lauren Cordain says. So if going full ketogenic in the beginning might be too much for you, you think that's just too out in left field for you, I got to eat real food and I have to stay away completely from sugar, maybe paleo diet is a better way for you to lean into this, and which is what I did. I leaned into it. I mean, it was a year evolution for me before I started figuring things out, and I failed a lot. I had planned failures. When I was doing a standard paleo diet, Thursday lunch, Sunday dinner, whatever I wanted to eat. Short stretches were better for me. If I was watching that TV commercial Tuesday night, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have that pizza this Wednesday. And then the next night, the Burger King commercial come on. Oh, double Whopper and grease, that's what I'm getting next time. You know, it gave me a short thing, and then I would have that one meal and then right back on the bandwagon. Don't make it Friday night, because what happens? Smears through the whole weekend then. At least for me it did. And some of you might be all in or nothing. So, that was a quick hour for me. Like I said, I think I could cover a semester's worth of material. Let's spend 5 minutes and answer some questions if you want. Does anybody have any burning desire or any questions that they want to ask? or something that I didn't cover that I could cover real quick? Naomi. Oh, yes. Yes, let's talk about those. Where? Let me find the soapbox. So exogenous ketone drinks. Okay, it's a bunch of smoke and mirrors. All right. The biology is this: that any medium chain triglyceride that hits your liver, C8, 10, 12, will turn to turn to acetoacetate and overflow to your blood as beta hydroxybutyrate. Okay, which will give you on pee strips as well as your blood meter an elevated ketone level. If your goal ultimately is to lose weight, you're ingesting more fat just to get a reading on your ketone meter. Your body will make these out of its own fat stores. You don't need to add them. All that is playing the pee strip game and the blood meter game. One more thing, I'm not going to argue that at some metabolic level for people with diseases like epilepsy that an elevated ketone level may not be to their benefit. But my research has shown so far on my N=1 is that olive oil actually does a better job than the exogenous ketones that I have tried. So if you are chasing ketones for no good reason other than it's a fad to be in ketosis right now, olive oil actually does a better job, and I use a natural local harvested olive oil. But there's no reason to have that elevated ketone level. Dr. Stephen Phinney, which is like the godfather of nutritional ketosis, says it doesn't matter if you're a 0.5 or a 5 in that range. There's no metabolic advantage to having an elevated beta hydroxybutyrate level, especially for his performance athletes as well as for the weight loss. Like I said, and also any medium chain triglyceride that hits your liver is going to produce that thing. So even if you're not in ketosis, your body will do that, even with the olive oil and coconut oil and stuff like that. So if you're just trying to play the game and want to spend a couple $100, spend it my way. I mean, I will send you exogenous water. And if you drink exogenous water for 24 to 48 hours and nothing else, you will be in a state of nutritional ketosis, I promise. That's actually, if you guys missed a Facebook Live I did a couple of weeks ago, I did that as a commercial. Anyway, no, yeah, it's not necessary for that reason. And I can't find a reason for elevated ketone levels, maybe beta hydroxybutyrate levels, unless for maybe there's an epileptic reason. And then, like I said, my tests have shown from blood and acetone level readings that olive oil worked better. Just regular old, like I use California brand because it's local. That's another good point. Don't buy the fancy, as much as I hate saying this, don't buy the fancy Italian olive oils off the shelf at Kroger's or Meijer's or wherever, because odds are they're rancid from coming over on the ship, and especially if they're not in a dark bottle, because they'll go rancid from the lights penetrating the glass. Okay, California even has a harvest date on the back, so you go, oh, I got the good stuff. I don't know what a good olive oil, a good year for olive oil is, but it has a harvest date on it. But to answer your question, it's a money-making pyramid thing. And I don't even want to say in my humble opinion. In my professional opinion, that's exactly what that is. People are weekend warrioring it back in the first generation of Atkins, where no one actually even read the book. If anyone actually reads the 1972 version of Dr. Atkins' book, it's meat and green vegetables. It's not a bad diet. That guy was a brilliant cardiologist who knew what he was doing. It's this, I didn't read the book, I told my friend about it version, where they're pounding tons of factory farm bacon and 5 pounds of cheese with every meal, is the scary version of Atkins. And in his book, he says 2 to 3 ounces. I got it highlighted. I said, I'm looking at this thing going, people are pounding pork rinds and sour cream like it's their job. He says right here, 2 to 3 ounces. Phase 1, meat and green vegetables. You don't get any more paleo than that, or any more primal than that, or natural human diet than that, because we ate that forever. Meat and green vegetables. It's all we had. Any other, yeah?
I have a question similar to what she asked. So huge trend, which there's upsides and downsides to that. But I see a lot of people who aren't educated about nutritional ketosis and how to adapt your macros to get your body into that natural state. I see them falling for the MLM, the drinks and all that. And so I wondered if they're having the drinks, but they're not adjusting their